So how do you break in a brand new 718 GT4? Maybe not the way I did it. Welcome to the Never Ending Weekend. When I first got the car, I was probably a little bit too careless figuring out how I was going to break it in. The salesperson who sold me the car kind of said they run these cars right out of the gate, so there's really no break-in period. Of course, I looked in the manual, in the table of contents. I couldn't find anything under breaking in or running in. I went to the web, did some searching. I couldn't find anything, and I just came to the conclusion that there was no actual official break-in for the GT4. In retrospect, that's kind of stupid, but that's what I thought. Now that I've done the break-in, going back and doing a little bit more research, why I didn't do that in the first place, I don't know. I found that there is some official guidelines from Porsche regarding a break-in. The general rule is that you want to keep it under 4,000 RPM for at least the first 2,000 miles or 3,000 kilometers. But of course, I didn't do anything like that. What stuck with me is something I found on the forums. I know forums might not be the best place to find information, but so for better or worse, that's what I did. And here we are today. With the magic of video, I'm going to go back right from the beginning and walk you through what I did. Maybe you can spot some good things, some bad things, but this is what I experienced. So let's take it on the road and show you. Okay, this is it. Maiden voyage. We're breaking in the car. So far, there's only about 20 kilometers on the odometer, still brand spanking new. When I picked up the car at the dealership, the salesperson kind of suggested that there really is no break-in required. So of course, I went to the forums. And just like anything else, there were a lot of different opinions. But let's first talk about what breaking in is exactly. When you first get a car, a brand new car, all the engine parts are machined to a very high tolerance, but still there's little microscopic bits still left over on the piston, on the cylinder wall, that doesn't create a perfect fit. So as you slowly wear in the car, these little imperfections get torn off and worn away and polished so that you do have a perfect fit. And along with that, you get better performance, better longevity on the engine, and things like that. But I've heard tolerances now in engine parts are so high that an extended break-in isn't really required. Also, there's this idea that if you break in a little bit too slowly, that those little microscopic bits get glazed over and you end up without having a perfect fit that way as well. Back in my motorcycle days, I remember people talking about heat cycles, just getting up the engine up to temperature and back down again. You can break in the engine within 100 miles. And the idea that the faster or the harder you break it in, the faster and more performance you'll get out of the engine. Who knows exactly? Anyways, I couldn't find an official break-in procedure for this car. So on the forums, I found something that I think I'm going to follow. Andreas Preuninger, the head of GT cars at Porsche, was quoted in saying that they have a specific break-in procedure at WISAC. WISAC is the R&D prototyping and think tank at Porsche. So I figure if they follow that procedure, it's good enough for me. I'm confident going that way, so that's what I'm going to follow. One thing to note, don't follow what I do. I'm probably a little bit impatient. I'm not really following the rules. There are some people who are breaking their cars way longer than I will be. So do your own research and hopefully get the most performance and longevity out of your car. And of course, whether you're breaking in your car or not, the tolerances in modern engines now are tight enough that you get the fluids going and then you can go. But don't push it until you got the water temperature and maybe even the oil temperature up. So I don't think I'm going to get too impatient. I still have to get used to the car. As you're breaking in the engine, there are a few things you want to keep in mind in general. Don't over rev your engine. Don't keep at a constant RPM for too long of a time. One thing that a lot of people overlook is don't lug your engine. Don't labor the engine by being too high of a gear for the speed you're going. And don't accelerate too hard. I think that's going to be harder than keeping the revs to a certain limit. Man, I'm short shifting without even going up to 4,000 RPM. There's 4,000 right there. I'm in third. I mean, I feel like I don't ever need to go more than 4,000 RPM. 4,000 RPM is plenty to drive around town. Even on the highway, I have a feeling, unless you're really trying to squeeze into a spot or pass someone, it might not be as hard to keep under 4,000 RPM as I thought it was going to be. It's 3,000 right there. 4,000. Yeah, plenty of revs. The fact that the GT4 has plenty of horsepower and really tall gearing, especially in the lower gears, I don't think I'm going to have a problem with the 4,000 RPM limit. I guess in general, I just drive the way I normally do, and if I'm into the pedal a little longer than usual, I just got to make sure I shift before 4,000 RPM. Let's take it out on the highway and see how it does there. Kind of chose a lower gear than I normally would be. So I'm in second, there's 4,000. Third now, 4,000. Yeah, unless I'm really pushing it, this is fine. The next rev limit increase is at 500 kilometers, so I'll check back in then. So I finally got to the first RPM increase level, 500 kilometers. So now I'm allowed to go to 5,000 RPM. 500 kilometers doesn't sound like a lot, but it felt like it was a while to get here. So like I was saying, I'm going to follow that protocol that Andreas Preuninger mentioned, the head of GT cars at Porsche. And it's a quote from when he was speaking to a group of people, and I'll read it so I don't mess it up. I can only tell you how I personally do it or how we do it at YSAC. For the first 500 kilometers or 300 miles, we don't drive that car ever over 5,000 RPM. Never. From then on, every 200 kilometers, we up the RPMs by 500, so we end up at 1,300, 1,400 kilometers at the threshold before we can really go full throttle at 800 or 900 miles. So that's kind of what I'm going to follow. Let's see how it goes. We're at 500 kilometers, I can go up to 5,000 RPM, but the gears, especially in first and second, are so long, it takes a while to get to 5,000 RPM. I keep on short shifting because we're in traffic. You don't want to trundle along at 4,000 or 5,000 RPM. I'm in second, 50 kilometers right now at 3,000 RPM. Boy, there's 4,000. I'm hitting 70 and traffic. I feel like even for 5,000 RPM, I really got to go on the highway. So here we are. That's 5,000 right there. And in second. So kind of gives you an idea how fast you have to go or how high you have to rev the car really. It's a bit excessive in normal traffic. Even here on the highway, third gear, going 90 kilometers an hour, 95, and I hit 4,000 RPM. I mean, on paper it's all well and good, but once you're actually driving, you have to go pretty fast to hit these engine speeds, unless of course you're down a gear. So I'm in third. I'm at 5,000 right now, 120 kilometers an hour. So we don't want to sustain that. We're just going back and forth through the gears, but that's our limit right now. And I can't floor it, so it kind of takes the fun out of it. But regardless, that's where we are right now. So fun. Oh, it's traffic. It's crazy. Traffic is not fun. And how am I supposed to reach 5,000 RPM, let alone 4,000? Anyways, we'll get the mileage in and get back with you at the next level increase, 5,500 RPM. So at 700 kilometers, came by pretty quick, and I'm raising my rev limit to 5,500 RPM. As I was saying before, even at 4,000, 5,000 RPM, you kind of had enough for the streets, so I'm finding I need to go on the highway now to try to get to high enough in the rev range to utilize the allowance in revs. And I feel as the higher I'm allowed to go, the less I'll hit those limits, which I guess is okay. I'll probably start loosening up on the amount of throttle I'm pushing, so that's fun. Accelerating a little bit harder each time probably. I still haven't floored it or really pushed it at all. Now that I have that little extra room when I'm passing cars on the highway, I just keep my foot in it a little bit longer, and that in itself is satisfying. Even though 5,500 is seemingly low, it's plenty. So even 5,500 is fun and fast. I wouldn't be surprised if I get a speeding ticket during breaking in the car. But again, having that freedom to kind of push into the accelerator a little bit more than I would when I was first starting, that's a fun thing. I'll check back in another 200 kilometers. Finally reached 900 kilometers and the ceiling has been lifted to 6,000 RPM. Should start in a second. Very satisfying. These engines really made to rev. It emphasizes that issue a lot of people have with this generation of the Cayman, which is the long first and second gears. I wish they were a little shorter. I don't know exactly why they did that. But you can pretty much go right up to speed limit on any city road in first gear. I mean, you'll be loud doing it, but I think I can hit 60 in first at 6,000 RPM, I believe. Lots of traffic. Man, breaking in a car is a lot harder than you'd think it would be, especially a car that has a really high rev limit. There's nowhere to exercise that kind of speed, but I guess it's fun trying. I think I'm going to have to get onto the highway. 6,000 RPM is going to be pretty hard on a regular street. I mean, it's not like I have to reach 6,000 RPM, but that's what I'm allowed to go up to. It's hard to remember not to put your foot into it as well. So over the next 200 kilometers, I'll rev it up to 6,000 whenever I get a chance. Once I get to 1,100, I'll check in again. We finally did it, past 1,000 kilometers. We're at 1,100 kilometers, that means 6,500 RPM. Maybe the wrong time of day. Even though it's the weekend, there's always traffic. Okay, let's do this. 6,500 RPM. It's getting harder and harder to get to these engine speeds. Okay, I'm in second. I feel like I should be in first. Let's put in first. Oh, I still short shifted. I can't help myself. 6,500 RPM and going way too fast for this road. Yeah, I mean, that was in second. I really have to be on the highway. Let's slow it down here. So I'm in first. Oh, I could probably be okay in first gear, driving around in first gear. I don't know if that's great for braking in either. Screaming at 6,500 RPM in first gear all the time. Yeah, I think I'm going to find it challenging to try to just get to 6,500 RPM once in a while. But at least I could keep it in gear for a little longer now. Even if it's 4,000 or 5,000, I don't have to short shift as quick. But still, it's going to be harder than you'd imagine. There's 6,200 RPM. It really emphasizes the fact that this car and likely all the GT cars are really meant for the track. There's so much engine speed. I mean, this is not the RS model, so we have a more conservative 8,000 RPM REDLINE. But to just to even hit 8,000 RPM, just to get even close, you need all kind of road space. Going on the highway, but I think the traffic's going to be too much. I'm pushing down on the throttle a little bit harder than I was when I first got the car. That's kind of fun, accelerating. Even if I don't get to all the way to the 6,500 RPM limit. Fourth gear. Barely over 5,000 and I'm going way too fast. Whoa. That was close. Pink Mercedes. Very funny. It's different. Ugly, really. Yeah, anyways, it's nice to have the extra headroom in the engine speeds. I'll put another 500 kilometers on the odometer and get back to you guys. Well, we finally made it, 1,300 kilometers, 7,000 RPM. I don't know where I'm going to do that. I mean, I feel like I have to go to a specific highway, which I know is not going to be that crowded. Now that we've gotten this far into the break-in procedure, it takes a lot of restraint to hold yourself back from really getting into the throttle, especially from a red light, especially if you're the first person waiting at a red light. Then there's the fun of grip. That's just as or more fun than the acceleration. Okay, let's see. Cruising here. Drop to third. Oh my gosh, that was like 6,200 RPM. Might have to drop it all the way to second. I know you don't have to actually hit these limits while you're breaking it in. It's just kind of like, okay, you can rev the engine that high now that you've worn in the engine to a certain degree. It's actually probably good for the engine to get to that high rev range once in a while when it's allowable, but it's so hard to get there. And I know I sound like a broken record, but you really have to be on the track almost. I mean, second gear riding on the highway is kind of ludicrous. You kind of have to be driving in the middle of the night too, so that there's absolutely no traffic. Second gear, highway speed, 6,000 RPM. There's 7,000. That's it. I'm in third. I can't get to 7,000 yet. Too much traffic. Crazy. So I'll try and hunt for these spaces where I can get to 7,000 RPM over the next 200 kilometers. Only 2 more levels to go until I'm fully broken in. Okay, I just ticked over 1,500 kilometers and I can go to 7,500 RPM now. I gotta say, even at 7,000, maybe even before that, there's nowhere where I needed more revs. I think avoiding full throttle is probably harder than not getting to a certain rev point. Wow, you really need a lot of space or really low gear. 7,500. 7,500. Oh boy. This is, more than anything, it's risky. One thing through this break-in procedure that I've really come to realize and made a decision about is I really have to go to the track. I mean, I was kind of planning to maybe go one day, but there's no way I could really take advantage of how this car drives or how fast it is, you know, the cornering, in any kind of safe manner on the road. I really have to take it to the track. And if I don't, I mean, for those guys who have the GT cars and never go on a track, I feel like you're missing out on something. It's gonna be hard to get to 7,500 RPM. But I'll continue to try, and I'll see you in another 200 kilometers. 1,700 kilometers, and that should be the end of the break-in. Stay tuned for the finale. I'm not gonna lie, I hit 1,700 kilometers the other night, right after leaving somewhere with a bunch of my friends. They're all in their own cars. But we were out in the country a bit, and at every stoplight, I'd line up with some friends, and bravado just got the best of me. And I knew that I'd broken the car fully, and I was just ripping through the gears. Probably not ideal, but temptation got the best of me. So I've already gone to 8,000 RPM. I'm just over the 1,700 kilometer limit. And to make things more, I don't know if it's annoying, but after doing a little bit more research, I found that the GT4 actually does have a break-in, suggested break-in period, and that's 2,000 miles, 3,000 kilometers, under 4,000 RPM, which I think in retrospect is very doable, but it's a little late now. Anyways, it was a fun ride. It was a relatively quick process, and even though I'm barely at 2,000 kilometers right now, I'm gonna drive it like it's fully broken in. What do you guys think? Was that a mistake, or you think it's okay? I know what you guys are gonna say already. If you like the GT4, I'm gonna do a full review video, tell you why it's the last pure driver's car that'll ever be made. And I'm gonna go do a bunch of stuff with it. I'll probably track it, maybe do some autocross, but stay tuned for that. So that's all she wrote. We got the GT4 broken in. Maybe a little bit too fast, but it is what it is. Now it's all over. Tell me in the comments if you think you would have done it differently. For now, have a great weekend, everyone.